Hello, welcome back to What a Future. Today we are joined by Charles Tincknell. Charles has been with Wilmot Dixon since 1999. He works for Wilmot Dixon Interiors, but is currently on secondment to Fortem, who are a social housing repairs and maintenance company. He handles and helps them with strategic planning, particularly around process and efficiencies. And I'm really grateful to have you with us today, Charles. Thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely delighted to be here, Fraser. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Excellent. Well, the audience know the question by now. I think I've told you in advance what the question is. Let's get straight into it. What is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
It's a killer question, isn't it? I think probably the biggest issue is around uncertainty. I think some things are speeding up and some things are slowing down. And, in uncertainty is all wrapped up with change, and the world is changing. And one word I'm going to use is uncertainty. And I think there's kind of uncertainty on a kind of macro level around, global issues. There are uncertainties around, the organization you work for usually, because it's dealing with big issues and dealing with the individual issues. And there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, to the people I speak with around themselves and their work and purpose of work and their own personal journey over the next few years. So I think in my mind, when I saw the question, the kind of one word that I encapsulates it is really uncertainty.
Interesting. You mentioned obviously there's big global issues going on. Probably too many we wouldn't fit them all into a 30-minute podcast if we tried. As you mentioned, the sort of local issues, the cost of living and technology and various other issues. To what extent is this a COVID problem that we're still hanging on to and haven't figured out, or was this a sort of inevitability? Was this always going to happen?
I think COVID, in a way, has enabled people to cope with change better. So there's been a kind of unintended consequence of improved ability to cope with change. People, generally businesses and people struggle with change. So I think that's a real positive around COVID. And it also makes the previously unthinkable, thinkable and doable. So those are very positive aspects to COVID, although it's an overall, obviously a dreadful negative and has upended everybody and everything. I'm by nature a very positive, optimistic person, so I see the positives in these things.
Of course,
I think what COVID has done is everybody's plans have had to change, and not everybody has changed their plans or their ways of thinking, which kind of leads to more uncertainty. So previous plans, certainly strategic plans, were built on a kind of essence of continuity and certainty. And a lot of that continuity and certainty is now gone. Also, what it does do is there's a huge glut of opportunity. There are huge amounts of opportunity around as well, because when you throw things up in the air, you have a whole new deck of cards to deal with that are face up. So, like I said, I'm a very positive person. I see huge amounts of opportunity. I see uncertainty driving that opportunity. I see COVID unsticking things that were stuck. But, with closed and open mindsets and growth mindsets, the opportunities are great if you've got a growth mindset. I think likewise, if you're not that agile in your thinking, the world is becoming a scarier place. I mean, there is, if you're waiting for certainty to make your plans, you're slowing down. And actually, there are bits of change in the world that are speeding up. Automation and AI, just to name two. And if you're up to speed and you want to have a growth mindset to take advantage, you're in a very fortunate position. But if you're scared of those changes and those freak you out a bit and you withdraw, the possibility of kind of either becoming unemployable or irrelevant are very real as well, in a way that kind of, if you look back in history with industrial revolutions, we're kind of going through an industrial revolution, but it's an odd one, because in the previous industrial revolutions there was like a exponential increase in productivity that enabled a completely new way of working. But in this industrial revolution, automation isn't quite good enough to give us that exponential change in productivity. You just have to look at when you go to the petrol forecourt. Instead of somebody filling up your petrol pump, you pay at pump.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not quite good enough for them to not really have somebody in the cashier or to tell you to put the spout in or reprogram. And you always need some sort of backup to the automation that we've got, because it isn't quite good enough to make an exponential change in productivity in a way that past industrial revolutions have done. So odd times, and uncertain about which way it's going to go.
Agreed. I mean, I think there's a couple of things to unpack there, which we'll come back to. But just pulling on that last one, I totally agree with you that we're sort of in or around the cusp of a industrial revolution that really could change a lot of things. I wonder there, what's your opinion? Are we just sort of trying to run a bit fast here? Are we seeing the early signs of there being opportunity here, which of course we can jump on, as you said, if you have this sort of growth mindset? But are we just sort of, before we can really judge the effectiveness of automation and AI, are we just a few years early?
Oh gosh, I think some bits of industry are a lot further forward than others. I think it's probably it'll be a classic. Well, I was going to say a bell shape, but there will be some areas of industries, certainly in the creative industries, where AI and automation is moving things along very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And dare I say it, some parts, maybe, construction, are a little bit further behind.
Mm-hmm.
The opportunities to greatly improve productivity through AI and automation are immense in every single area of human endeavour. And I think that if we look forward to what will be different in 5 years' time, it'll be the things that AI and automation can do that we thought were purely the domain of a human. I don't know what those are. I haven't got a crystal ball, but I'm fairly sure it'll look very different from where we are now, which is why kind of education and having a growth mindset and continual learning is, a must now. If you're not doing it, you'll slowly, incrementally fall away. And why is that important? As a person in work, you're there to earn money, to support your family, to live the lifestyle you want to do, and to do that, you add value to whatever organisation you're working for. As the world's moving on very quickly, if you're not keeping up with it, by definition, your value is decreasing.
Mm-hmm.
I want to make sure I'm just as valuable to my family in 5 years' time as I am now, not less valuable. So there's a personal, compelling sell to keep up with technology, however much you might have a personal view that you dislike it, or you might love it. But I think you kind of have a duty to yourself and your family. If you need work to provide for your family, you need to make sure you stay relevant. It's kind of as simple as that. And staying relevant means learning. And
I think that's true, and yet, of course, it can be very difficult, I think, to cut through the noise a lot of times. There's a lot of conversation, of course, about AI and its future here. Something that the article that, for those that are listening, the article that I wrote a few months ago is how Charles and I connected. There's a lot of conflicting viewpoints here. You've got Mo Gaudat's recent Diary of a CEO interview where he says, "Don't have children until we can fix this AI thing," because who knows where it's going to go. And yet you've got one of the godfathers of AI recently said that we need to be very careful about putting human traits onto an AI that is not human. And so that with all of this kind of going on, as I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the capabilities of ChatGPT as well. ChatGPT is not a search engine; it's a content writer, and they seem similar at a glance, but there are differences. And so the question here, I think, for me, is like, how do we ensure that we are staying relevant and not simply kind of going down the garden path on things when there is so much uncertainty? I think that's quite a difficult challenge for a lot of people.
It's a huge challenge. There is no guiding light to follow. You have to find, to a certain extent, your own way, because everybody's background is different. Everybody's skill sets are different. Everybody have different thinking preferences. So what it means to you and your job role will be kind of unique to you and your job role and the experience you bring to your job role. So I don't think there's any magic dust you can sprinkle over and say, well, here's 3 sources of the truth. Follow those and you'll be fine. You have to find your own way. I think the idea of waiting for people to show you the way is an error. I mean, you can't wait for the professional institutes or your company or the government to show you the way. Keep informed, and then you'll make better decisions yourself. The more informed you are, the better choices you'll make. I mean, life is all about choices, isn't it? As you said, the choice to have children, the choice to continue your development, the choice of how you manage your family's affairs and how you manage your career. They're all choices you make. And, the one choice I, put a plea out to everybody listening to this is make the choice of keeping up to date. Mm-hmm. And what I know one thing is true, and I remember it back from all the many years ago when I did my degree. The world of the things I learned in my degree were almost out of date by the time I finished my degree. Right. But you've got to continue to learn, and you build on those, and there are blind alleys, and actually just rejoice in them just as much as the ones that prove fruitful. Everything's a learning experience, and you go down a few alleys and make mistakes. They're the very best learning, as I'm sure many people on your previous podcast would have said. You learn more from your mistakes than your successes.
Totally. I mean, knowing what not to do is vital, isn't it? And yet, at the same time, I think it's also worth saying that as part of this mindset, you do have to accept that you will never make enough mistakes to make no more mistakes. Like the mistakes are endless; they will just continue. You just have to embrace them and as you say, celebrate them. I think that's really powerful.
It leads on to the conversation about what is a mistake, and the state when it's defined by a decision being right or wrong. Well, if it's right or wrong or white or black, it's not actually a decision. Mm-hmm. All decisions are in the middle bit, those shades of grey. So the trick or the ideal is to be 70% right and 30% wrong, rather than the other way around, and then learning to make sure that you keep on making the 70% ones rather than the 30% ones. So, decision making, fascinating subject.
Absolutely, and I mean, coming down to what is a mistake, and ultimately, I mean, the word that I choose is failure. I have no issue with failure, and actually, what I've always said to people who've worked for me is I expect you to fail and make mistakes, because if you don't do that, you're not pushing the boundaries. You're not trying anything new. You're not out of your comfort zone. And beyond that, I will never be angry or upset with you if you fail or make a mistake. What I will be very angry or upset with is if you choose to hide it. If you choose not to, to try and cover it up. I'll just forcefully remove my headphones here in a moment of passion. If you're covering that up and not accepting this and not getting the support of those around you, like that's a problem. But if we all collectively embrace failure, then this opens pathways up to, increased learning, pushing that envelope, learning, having opinions about things that we inevitably don't know about yet, etc. And that's important to me.
Yeah, mistakes, as you say, as long as you don't hide them. I have very poor hearing, so hearing you lose your headphones, I've made that mistake before. And I've decided not to have headphones because, and you probably saw me looking over there, I decided to turn the volume up on my speakers. I know I've got two big speakers in the room with me, so I can hear what you're saying, Fraser, because I made the mistake of having headphones and I couldn't. And of course, the damn things fall out.
Absolutely. And so, I mean, embrace the failure, right? You got to try it. You learn, and then you go forward. And you hope that the headphones don't come out at a critical moment, but then you find the solution going forward. Maybe I need some big speakers too.
Of course, this is where vanity comes in as well. If I follow this conversation to a logical conclusion, I don't always speak to people over the internet. I do actually speak to a few people face to face.
Gosh, you're one of them.
And I can't turn up the volume on them. No, my daughter keeps on saying, Dad, you've got to get a hearing aid because you miss so much. And I always counter by saying, well, yes, when I'm at work, people come and talk to me face to face. They don't talk to me from the other room. Yes. So when I'm in the kitchen, they don't talk to me from the sitting room. But, it's true. I probably do need to get a hearing aid, but there's the vanity coming in. I've lost my hair, so it's gone already.
Well, I want to loop back to something that you said earlier about the difference between people who have this growth mindset that we're talking about and who are able, I suppose, culturally, both, and that can mean in terms of organisations that can take on a culture of growth mindset and individuals as well, but. Choose, I think, whichever one you want to kind of dive into here. I think my question is, if there are people out there who struggle with a growth mindset for a number of reasons, maybe it was, the way that we were brought up, or things that, nature versus nurture, who knows whether we're born with growth mindset or we can make it. I think most people can exhibit growth mindset if they, if that's what they really, really try and do. But, how do we bring everyone with us? How do we make sure that we're not just splitting this into a yet bigger polarized camp of those who can keep up with change and those who can't? Because I think we've been seeing this with generational differences for a little while with regards to smartphones and various things. This could get worse if we're not careful.
It's a really interesting point to make, and in my mind, that yes, you have a responsibility as an individual, as I said, to your family, but actually, as an organisation or a company, you have a big responsibility to bring everybody in your business or organisation along with you. So, valuing a learning culture in your organisation is a key leadership element to have in your strategic plan. As I said, I do a lot of work on strategic planning, and alongside that goes culture and learning. It intertwines between all that, value learning and making sure that you actually have a really good learning culture in your organisation that enables people. And it's, I'm going to do a very odd simile. It's a bit like, seatbelts. Before people had to wear seatbelts, we got a culture in the country that people always put their seatbelt on. And it's now, inconceivable that you go out in the car and not put your seatbelt on. And it's just how we do things. You've got to get that culture. It's how we do things here. We have a learning culture. So it's almost harder not to learn than to learn. Mm-hmm. And, you mandate it, you make it, like everything I said is about choices. You make habitual the choice to learn in the organisation. And, you reward learning, you praise learning as a leader, you encourage learning. There's nothing more disappointing to see somebody being pulled off a course or taken out of some learning because of some operational issue. Mm-hmm. And my heart sinks every time it happens, because if we're not resilient enough as an organisation to be able to cope with something so important as adding value to somebody through learning, through an operational issue, we haven't got enough resilience in the business. We've not planned properly. We've not built in the checks and balances to enable it to happen. And actually, every time you pull somebody off a course, you're subliminally saying operations is more important than learning. Now, I know it's operations and profit and loss that pays for everything. So yeah, they are important, but you should plan and prepare to enable people to do the learning without affecting operations, because it's a priority of the business, a strategic priority of the business. So a bit of a long-winded answer. I think it's very much in, the individual has got to push, but the organisation's got to enable. It's a kind of parent, child, adult. You've got to take an adult position both as the organisation and the individual, and the organisation has got to enable that to happen in every way, and the people have got to step up to want it. It's ever so easy to say, I got to grips with the internet, I've got to grips with email, I'm now in my 60s, how am I going to cope with AI and automation? Well, find a way that motivates you to do it. Find that motivation within you, whether it's for your grandchildren's sake or your children's sake. Find a way to enable you to have the drive to want to get in amongst it. Because once you start to be on the slippery slope, oh, it's not for me, you're back in that diminishing value stream. So
yes, I think
that made sense at all. I felt I was rambling.
No, it was brilliant. I think it's it's very true. I think a lot of learning, as you say, is about motivation. The exploration of that kind of knowledge needs to have some kind of reward kind of mechanism to it, whether that is entirely intrinsic and it just makes you feel good. I'm studying game theory at the moment. Very fun, interesting stuff. Really like it. Not really gaining. It's not like I'm being paid for it or anything. It makes me feel good, and so that's where my sort of motivation has taken me with regards to to my learning. But I think that was a really interesting point that I just want to kind of reiterate there, that what you said about really it being about finding motivation. If you can find that motivation in order to learn, then that's the important thing, because it's safe, or it feels safe in the short term not to learn. My world is complete. I know my world. I'm not going to change my world. The world out there is not important to me. That's a kind of safe mindset. But actually, to push yourself to turn around and go, oh, hang on. In order to learn, right, you have to admit that you don't know everything. It sounds very obvious, but actually I feel it's very important. You have to admit that the world I'm looking at now is not the world I think it is.
We tell ourselves all sorts of stories. I mean, there's nobody that, we talked about, growth mindsets and closed mindsets. Everybody with a closed mindset thinks they've got a growth mindset. Yes. Everybody thinks they've got a growth mindset. And motivation is just so important. And along with it, wanting to have mastery, have curiosity, and apply the best way to find what works for you is to apply a bit of creative thinking. Think creatively about how you can find that motivation that you need to enable you to engage in a way that brings you pleasure. And to me, pleasure is seeing something that is wow. If I see a wow outcome, it's something I kind of feel in myself, and then I kind of say, well, if that's a wow outcome, what have I got to do to get to the outputs to give me that wow outcome? And then I'm thinking, well, what process is going to give me those outputs? And then what inputs do I need? And you're in a beautiful bit of process thinking, and you can kind of put your creative thinking into a process that will give you that wow outcome. And that's the way, the way I look at it, around creativity and joining bits of knowledge together to give you inspiration to come up with new ways of doing things.
I think it's really interesting. I mean, we were talking, of course, there specifically about a sort of single human experience, but actually there's also an incredible relevance to what you just said about organizations in general, both small organizations, with 5 people, all the way up to massive organizations with thousands and thousands. This, by the methods change, right? If there's 5 of you and you want to call a town hall sort of meeting, get everyone together and get some ideas, it's very, very easy. If you've got, 500,000 staff, or even more like the NHS, there's no room that can hold them all, and so you have to find different processes. But ultimately, that what you just said there, the inputs through to the processes, through to the outputs, through to the outcomes, that rinse repeat sort of cycle of saying, okay, I want to understand this thing better, or do this thing better, or the company wants to do this thing better. If we can get into a mindset of doing that constantly.
All you need is to have the imagination of what does a wow outcome look like.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that doesn't exist at the moment. What would make you go wow? It's something it gives you it's an energy thing. Wow, physical, emotional, spiritual, mental energy. Something that makes you go really wow, and then you just work back from there. And one of my big passions is creativity, and I think if you look at in 5 years' time, what will be valued more than anything? I think creative thinking will be one thing that is valued, because you're pulling things, bits of knowledge from all sorts of experiences that you've had inside and outside. And you said you're learning things that don't have any relevance, but they will have relevance at some point, or applied in some way, and kind of joining those dots together to through inspiration to create patterns. Then all you've got to do is evaluate, does that give me a wow outcome?
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of knowledge through inspiration, through evaluation to wow outcomes, will be the thing that I think will always be valued through history. And I'm sure the thinking of Sophocles in ancient Greece, the thinking behind Shakespeare and his plays, they all had that kind of creative thinking that made people go, wow, that was really good. In fact, it's not good, it's great. And in fact, it's not great, it's wow.
Mm-hmm.
And the vehicles will change through time, won't they? And we're going back to the Industrial Revolution. It was factories in the first Industrial Revolution, and then electricity, and now digital revolution, and who knows, AI will be the fourth one, fifth one.
Yes, probably of hundreds that we don't even know of yet. I think. I mean, we've done really quite a nice loop all the way through. I asked you right at the beginning, what's the biggest problem affecting the world of work right now, and you said uncertainty. And we established that the way that you address uncertainty is to have the kind of personal or organizational culture that can take uncertainty and find ways through, and approaches a sort of growth mindset. And then I think we've even gone as far as saying how you apply that and how you gain that kind of mindset if it maybe doesn't come naturally to you. Of how do we say, okay, well, what's the wow outcome? We've got to go and redo this thing because the world's changed and we can't do it anymore. A good example, sending everyone home at the beginning of the pandemic because they couldn't work in the office anymore. All of a sudden, everything changes. You go, right, what's a wow outcome? The wow outcome is, we're actually more productive and better than we were. So that you work back and you work back and you work back until you say, okay, this is what we've got to do now. But what I want to do is move on to the second question, because I think we're approaching this kind of area already. And the second question is, if we can get a grip of this, if we can fix this problem, what should we look forward to? What does the world look like in 5 years' time?
What is the I'd like to say a wow world. But after what I've said before, how could I say anything different?
Yes.
I mean,
what's more than wow?
I've yet to find it. What is more than wow? It's probably something spiritual. It's probably something which is, for me, around Taoism. It's around peace, harmony, happiness, inner contentment, feeling at one with the world. Wow, I suppose. That's probably what it means to me. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't expecting this conversation to go down in this direction, but it's a kind of, where does a wow thing look? It's a happier world where people, you know, yeah, it's kind of world peace, man, isn't it? It's, you know,
We
I
borrowed
suppose,
Charles from the 60s, if you hadn't noticed.
well, I don't, yeah, great decade. Yeah, I was born in 1964, so yeah, just about, yeah, kind of, I was compos mentis through most of '60s. Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
it's the
uh,
80s then that got you, wasn't
oh yeah,
it?
yeah. Well, the music of the '80s. I mean, there was a blossoming of creativity in the '80s, and I'm sure everybody thinks in their, you know, when they were in their 20s, that was a period of blossoming of creativity. What do I think? I'd like to see a world where built around, you know, where we're really creative about solving the issues that the world faces. We're creative about climate change. We're creative about how nations get on together. We're creative about how we live as societies, and, you know, leading to wow, happy, you know, Earth. I think, you know, how, if I kind of chunk down to what a wow looked like for the UK, what we're kind of missing at the moment is, you know, it is, we had quite a bit of clarity at the beginning of Brexit, and, you know, they were kind of thought, well, this is what Britain is going to be in the world. This is our brand. Now, how is UK going to be known in the world? You know, what do we stand for? And if I kind of say, what does wow look like in 5 years' time for the UK? It's a UK where we're the entrepreneurs. This is the best place in the world to have a startup business. We're the educators of the world. We are leading the way in education. And I suppose the last one, we have a bit of a head start. We're the communicators of the world. I suspect in the past, now with things like the BBC and the World Service, we were seen as communicators in the world. Well, I would like to see the UK being the communicators of the world. So I've got kind of three big dreams in of what does wow look like for, you know, UK PLC. That, you know, we educate and we're seen to lead the way there. You know, we communicate and lead the way there, and, you know, entrepreneurialism. We're the best place to start a business anywhere in the world, and I don't think we're quite there in all of them, but I think they're within our grasp. If we really, as a nation, got behind those, we could achieve all of those. Everything's possible. We have a great language in the English language. We have a great legal system. You know, we have a great basic education system as well. The basis is all there to build on those being our superpowers. And yeah, I mean, yeah, let's call them superpowers.
Well,
Uh,
yes, it's a slightly difficult word, isn't it? If you think of sort of Cold War, or you know, maybe we should be a little careful with into political, you know, geopolitical issues. But
well, I was having a conversation. It's very obvious over lunchtime with my wife about superpowers, and saying that everybody has their superpowers,
yes,
and it's just, how do you enable people to find their superpower? And I've been talking about writing a book, and so we were talking around whether that is a subject to bring into a book about creative thinking and how you pull out people's superpowers. You know, they are called USPs in organisation. You know, what's your unique selling point? What's your superpower? What can you do that, you know, gives you that clear water between you and your competition? What are your superpowers as an individual? What makes you the very best at what you do and what you choose to do? So, yeah, I know superpower comes with a lot of connotations.
it depends which way you hear it. On an individual level, it's absolutely, you know, absolutely the way to go, isn't it?
Yeah. So
I was only really trying to be silly, but I mean, I think that's you know, a very good point and very interesting. I think, you know, if we can, one of the issues that I've always, as a story I tell, I actually started life as a musical instrument maker,
As a
So,
what? Sorry,
as a musical instrument maker.
I need to turn my speakers up.
Get some headphones, you'll be fine.
Oh, if only I thought, yeah, perhaps I need to get some headphones at work, or once I turn the volume up on.
Yes, I started life as an instrument maker, and when I was at school, I had already been accepted into the college where I was going to make musical instruments. So I didn't go to university, which was very confusing for the school that I was at. They just didn't compute at the time. Anyway, I went and sat with a careers advisor, and this careers advisor said, what do you want to be when you're older? Because they're pretty good at asking that question. It's a bit of a go-to. Anyway, they asked me this question. I've already filled out this form that's tried to assess what I'll be, and I said, what I want to be is an instrument maker, and I've already booked onto a course, and that's what I'm going to go and do. And they turned around and said, okay, but that's not a real job. Have you considered being an architect? And I went, no, well, I have considered being an architect, but I don't want to be an architect. I want to be an instrument maker, so I'm going to go off and do that. Yes, but that's not a real job. So have you considered being an architect? And it really struck me that this was a total breakdown of communication or idealistic thinking here. And I think it's interesting. The reason why I sort of bring that up is that we often think in these kind of terms of, I want to be a that. We ask children, what do you want to be when they grow up? And you expect them to say a doctor or a lawyer or an innkeeper or whatever it is that you want to do in your life, or that you have aspirations that your children would do. We tend to just back straight into this idea of what label should we be assigned. But I think actually, if we look at it the way that you've just said about what's your superpower, what's the thing that you can bring that other people, it's not a competition, right? But if it's good to be aware of the things that you can do better than most people. And generally speaking, we do those things because we enjoy them. I get the sense from talking to you that, if I had to say, why would we bring Charles Tincknell onto our board of directors? It's well, he introduces creativity into strategic thinking. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's sort of what you do.
It kind of, it's difficult to hear yourself being summed up in about 3 words, but yeah, you're pretty much.
I can try and 4.
Yeah, that is. I tend to come up with different ideas to many people. That creative thinking, strategic, big picture thinking, and then pulling it back down. The other thing I do look after is systems and processes. So you go from that kind of very visionary, strategic view to how you deliver it in nuts and bolts processes, and then the kind of the creative thinking and creativity. Like many people that work, I've done lots of isometric tests and things like that, and I did one where it said your creativity, I think it was 0.4% of the population is more creative than you, and kind of 99.6% are more practical than you. Well, of course, I work for a construction company. This is the problem. So the next month, I went along to the board meeting, and I presented the test results, and of course, the rest of the directors said, "Yeah, well, we know that, Charles. It doesn't come as a surprise at all." The trouble is, I think I'm quite practical. We tell our own stories, don't we? But I mean, interesting, when you were going back to being an instrument maker, it started to make me think, what when I was a child, I wanted to be a gold prospector.
Oh, wow.
And the reason I wanted to do that is in the late 60s, early 70s, there used to be a thing called the Friday Western. And it was on every Friday afternoon at kind of 4:30, 5 o'clock. And I was allowed to watch the Friday Western with my tea on a tray. And every time, there was this guy panning for gold in a river, and he'd find this big nugget, and then he'd be the richest guy in town. He'd go into town and he'd have a smart suit on and buying drinks for everybody. I thought, I want to be that guy. That's who I want to be. So I went through all my schooling, primary school, secondary school, boarding school, university. At university, I did a geology degree because I wanted to be a gold prospector. When I graduated, oil went down to $15 a barrel. There
Right.
was no jobs in geology whatsoever. And in fact, I think the week I graduated, BP made 150 geologists redundant. So there was no chance of jobs in geology, let alone prospecting. And my sister was working in recruitment at the time. And I said, well, what's booming? And she said, oh, construction's booming. And so I kind of thought, oh, well, I'll give that a go. So you make all these plans, you go all the way through university, you decide what you're going to do, and then wallop. You've got to be a bit flexible in your thinking and creative in the direction you go forward. And I found myself in the construction industry.
Absolutely, and clearly putting those those skills, those creative thoughts, to good use. I think where this sort of the sort of logical sort of conclusion for me is, it's the answer to the what do you want to be when you grow up in the careers department should not be musical instrument maker or architect or even geologist. It should be, I want to give creative answers to strategic problems, or I want to find creative ways to improve process, or those skills, as you called them earlier, those superpowers. If we can identify those things that give us happiness and joy and motivate us, we touched on motivation as a meaning for learning, then if we can fix all of those bits, then that ultimately becomes the really powerful element there.
Where it relates very much to work and people doing the right jobs and the right roles is if you can identify early enough in somebody's life what their superpower naturally is or is developing through their teenage years, and then making sure that you go down a career that enables you to use your superpower, you will be good at what you do. You will enjoy what you do. You will be motivated in what you do. And where that's important for the kind of the customer supplier relationship is, as a client, you can't expect to get wow performance out of people doing jobs that they're not happy doing. How can you be happy with their outcomes if they're not happy doing the job role they're doing? So working with organizations that have happy people that are working to their strengths and their skill sets, they're going to get a much better service than anybody else by a country mile, because they have those intrinsic and extrinsic motivations all wrapped into what they do. If there's one bit of advice I'd say to anybody starting off in the world of work, is keep looking for a job that you absolutely adore and love. Never settle for, I need to do that for a big salary, or I need to do that for the career progression. Because if it's not what you want, you'll always be compromising. And life is, as I said, it's all about choices. You don't want to start off compromising your choices when you've got an open book.
Brilliant. What an amazing place to finish there, Charles. That was really powerful. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wisdom there. I thought that was a really interesting chat, and some solutions I think can be brought out of that for some large problems that we've got in the world. I think that was really brilliant. Thank you, Charles. Thank you so much for joining us.
Fraser, thank you ever so much. I've really, really enjoyed it. I'm exhausted, but I've really, really enjoyed it. The sign of success.
Absolutely.
Hopefully it'll be a wow outcome.
Coffee. That'll fix it. Wow outcomes all round. Brilliant. Thank you so much, Charles.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Bye.